I'm Garrett Wilson, 34, owner of a boutique retail store called Parallel, in downtown Seattle. At least, that's what my family thinks. They have no idea I just closed a $1 billion acquisition call before driving to Thanksgiving dinner in my deliberately modest Honda. My mother Nancy, a Meridian Retail Corp VP, always introduces me as her son who hasn't found his path yet. If only they knew what awaited them tonight. Before I tell you how their mockery spectacularly backfired, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe to see more family reunions that end with jaws on the floor. Family gatherings were always performance reviews in disguise at the Wilson household. From my earliest memories, success wasn't celebrated, it was expected. My mother Nancy built her career at Meridian Retail Corp with military precision, climbing from sales associate to vice president of operations over 25 years. She approached parenthood with the same efficiency she applied to quarterly projections: measure, evaluate, optimize. My father Thomas, a corporate attorney specializing in mergers and acquisitions, was more subdued but equally achievement-oriented. Dinner conversations revolved around market trends, corporate strategy, and the importance of attending the right schools to secure the right connections. Their world was one of calculated networking and strategic career moves. Then there was my older brother Bradley, 4 years my senior and seemingly engineered in a lab to be the perfect corporate successor. Bradley excelled at everything: varsity lacrosse captain, valedictorian, Stanford Business School graduate. He followed our mother into the corporate retail world, joining a competitor of Meridian right out of college before being headhunted by Goldman Sachs for their retail investment division. His trajectory was as predictable as it was impressive. "Your brother just closed the Henderson account," my mother would announce at dinner. $3 million in consulting fees. These statements weren't posed as celebrations but as benchmarks against which I was measured and consistently found wanting. It wasn't that I lacked ambition. My interests simply lay elsewhere in the retail ecosystem. While my family viewed retail through spreadsheets and executive boardrooms, I was fascinated by the actual products, customer experiences, and operational innovations happening on the ground floor. During my sophomore year at the University of Washington, while pursuing my business degree, I launched my first e-commerce platform selling customized athletic gear. It wasn't revolutionary, but it taught me invaluable lessons about supply chains, customer acquisition costs, and digital marketing. I reinvested every dollar of profit into learning more about retail operations. "It's a nice hobby," my mother said when I showed her the website that was generating 5 figures monthly. "But you need to think about a real career path. Have you considered the management training program at Meridian?" I could make a call. After graduation, when my classmates rushed to secure positions at prestigious firms or entered MBA programs, I used my savings to open a small boutique retail store in downtown Seattle. Parallel was deliberately small, just 800 square feet of carefully curated clothing, accessories, and home goods from independent designers. Its purpose wasn't to make me rich but to serve as a laboratory where I could test retail concepts, supply chain innovations, and customer experience ideas. "You spent 4 years at UW to open a gift shop?" Bradley laughed during a family dinner shortly after my grand opening. "That's like getting a pilot's license to drive a golf cart." "It's not a gift shop," I explained patiently. "It's a concept store focusing on sustainable brands and—" Sure, my mother interrupted, patting my hand condescendingly. "Everyone needs to find their level. Not everyone is cut out for the corporate world." What they couldn't understand was that I wasn't rejecting their world. I was studying it from a different angle. While they viewed retail from the top down, I was building my understanding from the ground up. Every inventory decision, every customer interaction, every staffing challenge was teaching me something that no Harvard case study could convey. What my family also didn't know was that I had been quietly developing a business plan for something much larger. Something that would combine the intimate customer knowledge gained from small-scale retail with the technological innovation that was disrupting the entire industry. I wasn't sharing this plan with them because I'd made a private commitment to myself. Whatever I built would be constructed without family connections, without leveraging my mother's position, without riding on my family name. "I just worry you're wasting your potential," my mother said during our monthly lunch, about 6 months after I opened Parallel. "You're 30 years old now. Don't you want more than just this?" She gestured vaguely at my store as if it were a disappointment made physical. "I'm learning exactly what I need to learn," I told her, knowing she wouldn't understand. Not yet, anyway. It was during those early years that I realized a profound truth. My family conflated status with success, position with purpose. Their definition of achievement was so narrow that anything outside the corporate ladder was automatically categorized as failure. It wasn't malicious. They genuinely believed they were pushing me toward happiness as they understood it. So I stopped trying to convince them and instead channeled that energy into proving them wrong in ways they couldn't yet see. Their dismissal of my small shop became the silent fuel for what would become something they couldn't possibly ignore. While my family thought I was simply running a boutique store struggling to make rent, I was methodically building the foundation for something revolutionary. Parallel wasn't just a store, it was my laboratory, classroom, and proving ground. Every day provided insights no MBA program could teach: how customers physically moved through retail spaces, which product placements triggered impulse purchases, how staffing affected customer satisfaction, and the precise inventory turnover needed for optimal cash flow. But the real work happened after hours, in a small office space I rented 3 blocks away from the store. There, using the name Trevor Campbell, my mother's maiden name combined with my middle name, I began developing a technology platform that would eventually become Access Global. The concept was straightforward but powerful: create a unified digital infrastructure for physical retail that could transform any brick-and-mortar store into a data-driven, customer-responsive environment. The platform integrated inventory management, customer behavior analytics, predictive purchasing, and seamless omnichannel experiences. It was essentially bringing the advantages of e-commerce to physical retail spaces while maintaining the irreplaceable human elements of in-person shopping. My first major breakthrough came when I used my life savings to acquire a failing 3-store chain called Urban Provision in Portland. The owner was retiring, and the business had been steadily losing market share to online competitors. I purchased it for pennies on the dollar, immediately implemented my Access systems, and within 6 months, sales had increased by 40%. More importantly, operating costs decreased by 28%. I reinvested every dollar of profit. Living in a modest 1-bedroom apartment, and driving the same Honda Civic I'd had since college. No one in my family questioned my lifestyle, they simply assumed I couldn't afford better. Which served my purposes perfectly. By year 3, operating still as Trevor Campbell to anyone outside my innermost circle, I had acquired 11 more struggling retail chains across the Pacific Northwest. Each implementation of the Access system yielded similar results: dramatically improved sales, reduced costs, and enhanced customer loyalty. I was proving my thesis that physical retail wasn't dying, it was simply operating on outdated models. "Garrett, I ran into Diane Matthews at the country club," my mother mentioned during one of our infrequent phone calls. "Her daughter is single again. She works in banking. Should I give her your number?" "I'm really busy with the store right now, Mom," I replied, sitting in a hotel room in Chicago where I was finalizing the acquisition of a 30-store Midwest chain. "Maybe another time." "Busy with the store," she repeated with a sigh. "Sweetheart, at some point you need to think about your future. Bradley just put a down payment on a vacation home in Aspen. And here you are working 60-hour weeks for what can't be much more than minimum wage." I let her believe what she wanted. The truth was far more interesting. Axis Global had just secured $50 million in venture capital funding after our technology caught the attention of several major retail investors. We were valued at over $300 million, and I owned 70% of the company. By year 5, Axis Global had grown to become the parent company of over 40 retail brands, employing advanced data analytics and proprietary technology to transform each one into a high-performing asset. We had stores in 38 states and were beginning international expansion into Canada and the UK. Our workforce had grown to over 12,000 employees. Though most of them didn't know that Trevor Campbell and Garrett Wilson were the same person. The few who did know my dual identity were people I trusted implicitly. My COO, Rachel Dawson, had been my roommate in college and was one of the sharpest operations minds I'd ever encountered. My cousin Lauren, who worked in marketing and had always been the one family member who understood my vision, helped maintain the separation between my public and private identities. And my chief technology officer, Dominic Reyes, had been building the technical infrastructure of Axis since our earliest days. "You realize how insane this is, right?" Lauren said one night as we reviewed plans for our newest acquisition. "Your mother brags about Bradley's corner office to everyone who'll listen. And she has no idea her own son is running a company valued at over $2 billion. It's not about the money," I explained, though the irony wasn't lost on me. "It's about proving the concept works on its own merits, not because of family connections or name recognition." The real test of our model came when we acquired Silverman's, a century-old department store chain with 73 locations that had filed for bankruptcy protection. The retail industry watched with curiosity as the mysterious Axis Global and its reclusive CEO Trevor Campbell took control of an American retail institution. Within 18 months, we had turned the company profitable again by strategically closing underperforming locations, reimagining the remaining stores as experiential retail environments, and implementing our proprietary technology stack. That success put us on the radar of every major player in the retail sector, including Meridian Retail Corp., my mother's employer. Meridian was a retail giant with over 300 locations nationwide, known for their middle-market positioning and increasingly outdated business model. Their stock had been underperforming for years as they failed to adapt to changing consumer behaviors. The decision to pursue Meridian wasn't personal, it was strategic. Their real estate holdings alone were worth the acquisition price, and their established supply chain could be leveraged across our entire network. But I won't pretend there wasn't a certain poetic justice in the symmetry of it all. "Are we really doing this?" Rachel asked when I presented the acquisition plan to our executive team. "It's the right move for the business," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Their market position complements our existing portfolio, and our technology can streamline their operations significantly. And the fact that your mother is a VP there has nothing to do with it?" Dominic raised an eyebrow. "That's a coincidence that will be dealt with appropriately when the time comes," I said. "For now, this remains confidential. The offer goes out tomorrow after market close." As I drove to my parents' house for Thanksgiving dinner, the acquisition paperwork had just been delivered to Meridian's board of directors. By the time the turkey was carved, my mother's company would be facing a takeover bid from the mysterious Trevor Campbell of Axis Global, who would soon be revealed as her supposedly underachieving son. The familiar streets of Bellevue's Maidenbower Bay neighborhood brought back a flood of memories as I navigated my Honda Civic past sprawling waterfront homes. My parents' colonial-style house stood as a monument to corporate success: 4 bedrooms, 3-car garage, immaculately landscaped yard, and the requisite view of Lake Washington that announced you'd made it in Seattle's status hierarchy. I parked between my Uncle Frank's Mercedes SUV and my Aunt Patricia's Lexus, my modest vehicle looking decidedly out of place. This visual contrast was exactly why I'd kept driving my 10-year-old Civic despite having the means to purchase any car I wanted. Perception management was a crucial component of maintaining my dual identity. Balancing a homemade cranberry pie, purchased from a local bakery but transferred to my own dish, another small deception. I rang the doorbell and braced myself for the annual performance review disguised as a family gathering. My mother answered, martini already in hand. Her careful makeup and cashmere sweater set projecting the polished image she'd maintained for decades. "Garrett! You made it!" She air-kissed my cheek, careful not to smudge her lipstick. "Everyone's in the living room. Your brother just called, he's running late. Something about an emergency call with Tokyo." She conveyed this information with unmistakable pride. The living room buzzed with the familiar faces of extended family. Uncle Frank, my father's brother and a commercial real estate developer, held court near the fireplace. Aunt Patricia and her husband Greg, both physicians, discussed their recent African safari with my father. My teenage cousins huddled around their phones, occasionally looking up to acknowledge new arrivals. "There he is!" Uncle Frank boomed when he spotted me. "The shopkeeper himself. How's retail treating you, son? Surviving the Amazon apocalypse?" His laugh was hearty but tinged with the subtle condescension I'd grown accustomed to. "We're doing well," I replied with a practiced smile. "The store's hitting its targets." "That's great." "That's great." He nodded, clearly uninterested in the details. "Say, you ever think about getting into real estate? I could show you some investment properties that would give you a nice passive income stream. Might be time to think about a backup plan, you know?" Before I could respond, Lauren swooped in to rescue me. My cousin was the only family member who knew about Axis Global, having joined the company 3 years ago as our Director of Consumer Insights. "Uncle Frank, stop hogging Garrett," she chided playfully. "I need his expert opinion on a gift for my boyfriend." She linked her arm through mine and steered me toward the kitchen. "Thanks for the save," I murmured once we were out of earshot. Lauren smirked. "I figured you might need it. Fair warning. Aunt Patricia was just telling everyone about running into you at your store last month and how quaint it was. Also, Bradley texted Mom that he's bringing Vanessa tonight." "Vanessa?" I raised an eyebrow. "The new girlfriend. Senior manager at Deloitte. Dad says Bradley's been not so subtly mentioning marriage." I nodded, absorbing this intelligence report on family dynamics. "How long until he brings up his bonus?" "I give it 10 minutes after arrival." Lauren laughed. "Also, your mom has been talking about Meridian all afternoon." "Apparently. There's some big reorganization happening in Q1. She's convinced she's getting a promotion to senior VP." The irony nearly made me choke on the sparkling water I'd just accepted from a passing server. My mother's company would be completely reorganized in Q1, but not in the way she was expecting. "Garrett! Come help me with these canapes." My mother beckoned from across the kitchen, where she was arranging an elaborate display of appetizers that I knew had been catered despite her pretense of having made everything herself. As I arranged prosciutto-wrapped asparagus on a silver platter, my mother launched into her subtle interrogation. "How are things really going at your shop, sweetheart? Your father and I worry. You know, retail is such a difficult business these days." "The store is performing well, Mom. We've actually increased revenue 15% year over year." She patted my arm. "That's nice, dear. But is it sustainable? You've been at this for, 6 years now? At some point, you need to think about growth. Or perhaps a career change. Bradley says his firm is always looking for bright people in their retail consulting division. I appreciate the thought, but I'm happy where I am." I kept my voice neutral despite the familiar frustration building inside me. "Well, happiness doesn't fund retirement accounts," she replied with a tight smile. "Speaking of Bradley, did Lauren tell you he's bringing Vanessa tonight? She's absolutely brilliant. Managing 6 accounts at Deloitte already, and she's only 32. The doorbell rang, saving me from having to respond. My mother's face lit up. "That must be them now." Bradley's entrance was precisely what I'd expected, confident bordering on arrogant. Dressed in a tailored suit despite the casual nature of the gathering, with a striking woman on his arm who surveyed the room with calculating eyes. He carried a bottle of Dom Perignon as casually as if it were $2 chuck. "Sorry we're late," he announced to the room. "Had to finish a call with the Tokyo office. Their retail market is absolutely fascinating right now." He said this loudly enough to ensure everyone heard, then spotted me. "Garrett. Little brother. Still running that boutique of yours?" And so it began. "Everyone, please take your seats," my mother announced with the practiced authority of a corporate executive. The dining room table stretched impressively beneath a crystal chandelier, set with the fine china reserved exclusively for holidays and important guests. Place cards positioned family members strategically, my parents at the heads of the table, Bradley and Vanessa in positions of honor near my father, and me tucked between Aunt Patricia and my 16-year-old cousin Tyler. My father stood to carve the turkey, another performance in our family's theater of tradition. "Before we begin, I want to express how grateful I am to have everyone here, celebrating another year of achievements and success." Predictably, his eyes lingered on Bradley as he mentioned success. A subtle but unmistakable hierarchy of family pride that had been established decades ago. "Bradley, perhaps you'd like to share your news before we serve?" my mother suggested, practically vibrating with anticipation. My brother straightened in his chair, adopting the same posture he likely used during board presentations. "Well, I wasn't going to say anything until it's official, but since Mom brought it up." He paused for dramatic effect. "Goldman is announcing their new partner selections next month, and my managing director has all but confirmed I'm on the list." A chorus of impressed murmurs circulated around the table. Becoming a partner at Goldman Sachs at 38 was indeed impressive, even by our family's exacting standards. "That's wonderful, son," my father beamed. "The youngest partner in your division, I imagine?" "Second youngest," Bradley corrected with false modesty. "Though I'll be managing the largest portfolio." Uncle Frank raised his wine glass to Bradley, continuing the Wilson tradition of excellence. Glasses clinked as my mother practically glowed with pride. I participated in the toast sincerely. For all our complicated history, Bradley was talented and had worked hard for his achievements. "And what about you, Garrett?" Aunt Patricia turned to me after the congratulatory moment had passed. "Any exciting developments at your little shop?" All eyes shifted to me, expressions ranging from polite interest to barely concealed pity. "We're doing well," I replied evenly. "Just finalized a new collection from several independent designers that's performing above projections." "That's nice," my aunt replied with the same tone one might use to acknowledge a child's crayon drawing. "And is it still just you running the place?" "I have 2 full-time employees now, plus weekend help." 2 employees. Uncle Frank chuckled. "Bradley, didn't you say your team at Goldman is up to what now, 15 people?" 23, actually," my brother corrected. "Plus support staff." "Garrett is taking a different path," my mother interjected with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Not everyone is suited for corporate pressure. I've always admired small business owners." Vanessa offered in what seemed like a genuine attempt at kindness. "The passion it must take to keep a boutique alive in the age of Amazon is impressive." "Thank you," I replied, recognizing her comment as the only one thus far without a patronizing undertone. "Though I imagine the income fluctuations must be stressful," she added. "At Deloitte, we see so many small retailers struggling with cash flow management." And there it was. "Garrett's always been independent," my father commented, carving perfect slices of turkey onto fine china plates. "Even as a boy, he preferred to do things his own way rather than follow conventional wisdom." The subtext was clear. My independence was viewed not as strength but as stubborn deviation from the proven path to success. "The retail landscape is fascinating right now," Bradley pivoted. clearly more comfortable discussing the industry than my specific place in it. We're advising several major chains on digital transformation strategies. The old models simply don't work anymore. Speaking of which, my mother brightened. I've been meaning to tell everyone about Meridian's incredible quarter. Our division exceeded targets by 18%. As plates of food circulated, my mother launched into a detailed account of Meridian's recent successes and her role in orchestrating them. I ate silently, aware that in a matter of hours, everything she was proudly describing would be under new management, my management. We're positioning for major expansion next year, she continued. The board is considering acquisitions to strengthen our market position in the Pacific Northwest and mountain regions. Fascinating strategy, I commented neutrally. Though the retail consolidation trend has produced mixed results for traditional department stores. My mother's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Well, Garrett, when you're operating at Meridian scale, the dynamics are quite different from a single-location boutique. Completely different universes. Bradley agreed, swirling his wine. Mom's dealing with 9-figure budgets and nationwide operations. No offense, Garrett, but it's like comparing a paper airplane to a Boeing 787. Laughter rippled around the table. And I managed a good-natured smile while taking another bite of mashed potatoes. Garrett's store is charming, though, Aunt Patricia offered. I bought the cutest scarf there last month. I'm sure for customers looking for that personal touch, it's lovely. Exactly. My mother nodded. There's room in the market for all types of retail experiences. The boutiques serve their purpose for certain demographics. Though I read that independent retailer failure rates hit 68% by year 5. Uncle Frank added. Tough business. That's why I always tell my kids to build careers with clear advancement paths. Speaking of which, Tyler here just got accepted to Stanford early decision. He clapped my teenage cousin on the shoulder. More congratulations circulated while I felt Lauren's sympathetic glance from across the table. So, Garrett, Uncle Frank turned back to me. Level with us. How much longer are you going to stick with the shop experiment before getting a real job with benefits? Your parents won't say it, but I know they worry. A momentary hush fell over the table at his bluntness. Frank, my father began, but I raised my hand slightly. It's a fair question, I replied calmly. The store is profitable and serves its purpose in my overall plans. Overall plans? My mother repeated skeptically. Garrett, you're 34. Most successful people have established their career trajectory by your age. Bradley was already a vice president at Goldman when he was 32. Different paths, Mom, I reminded her. Yes. But some paths actually lead somewhere. Bradley chuckled. No offense, but managing inventory for a small boutique doesn't exactly build transferable executive skills. I took a sip of water, letting the comment hang in the air for a moment. You'd be surprised what you can learn running a retail operation from the ground up. I'm sure it's very educational, my mother conceded. But sweetheart, I worry that you're wasting your potential. You graduated with honors from UW. You could have gone anywhere, done anything. And instead, you're spending your prime career building years running a shop that will never grow beyond what it is now. The irony of her statement nearly made me laugh out loud. At that very moment, my executive team was finalizing the details of our offer for Meridian Retail Corp., a deal that would add her company's 300 stores to my existing portfolio of over 150 locat ions across 4 countries. Not everyone measures success by the same metrics, Mom, I replied diplomatically. That's such a millennial response. Uncle Frank laughed heartily. Success is success. It's measured in dollars and cents, advancement, and achievement. Everything else is just feel-good rationalization. I felt Lauren kick me under the table, her expression clearly communicating, you could end this right now. But I wasn't ready yet. The evening was still young, and the most interesting part hadn't even begun. To each their own. I shrugged, helping myself to more cranberry sauce. Bradley, tell us more about this partnership track. That's genuinely impressive. As attention shifted back to my brother's accomplishments, I checked my watch discreetly. The acquisition offer had been delivered to Meridian's board 30 minutes ago. The countdown to revelation had begun. After dinner, the family migrated to the living room for coffee and dessert. My mother's pumpkin cheesecake, catered but presented as homemade, was being distributed as my father poured after-dinner drinks. The conversation had mercifully shifted away from my career disappointments to my cousin Tyler's college plans and my aunt's recent vacation in the Maldives. I was engaged in a surprisingly pleasant conversation with Vanessa about sustainable retail practices when my mother's phone rang. She glanced at the screen with a frown. "It's Richard," she said, referring to her boss, the executive VP of operations at Meridian. "That's odd. He never calls on holidays." She stepped into the hallway to take the call. The family conversation continued, but I found myself watching the doorway. Within moments, I could hear my mother's voice rising in what sounded like distress or disbelief. The living room chatter gradually quieted as others also noticed the tension in her voice. When she returned, her complexion had paled visibly beneath her perfect makeup. Her hand trembled slightly as she clutched her phone. "Nancy?" my father questioned, setting down his scotch. "What's wrong?" My mother looked around the room as if suddenly remembering she had an audience. She straightened her shoulders, the corporate executive reasserting control. "It's nothing to worry about," she said with forced casualness. "Just an unexpected business development at Meridian. There's an emergency board meeting tomorrow morning." "On Black Friday?" Bradley asked incredulously. "That's the biggest retail day of the year. What could possibly warrant pulling executives away from stores on Black Friday?" My mother's professional facade slipped momentarily. "Apparently, we've received a takeover offer. A substantial one." The room fell silent. Corporate acquisitions were familiar territory in our family conversations, but the timing and my mother's reaction suggested this was no ordinary business transaction. "From whom?" my father asked, his mergers and acquisitions attorney mind immediately engaged. "A company called Axis Global," my mother replied, and I felt Lauren's eyes immediately fix on me from across the room. "They're a relatively new retail conglomerate that's been acquiring underperforming chains and turning them around with some proprietary technology platform. Richard says they've grown exponentially over the past 5 years." "Axis Global," Bradley repeated thoughtfully. "They're the ones who revitalized Silverman's, right? Impressive work there." "They've been very secretive about their operations and leadership." "Well, apparently that's about to change," my mother continued, sinking into an armchair. "The CEO wants to personally address our board tomorrow. Someone named Trevor Campbell." I felt a curious sensation watching my family discuss my company and my alternate identity, completely unaware that the subject of their conversation was sitting among them, calmly eating pumpkin cheesecake. "Is it hostile?" my father asked, his attorney instincts kicking in. "The offer is extremely generous," my mother admitted. "Well above market value. Richard says the board is likely to recommend shareholders accept it." "What would that mean for your position?" Aunt Patricia asked with genuine concern. My mother's lips tightened. "Uncertain. Acquisitions usually mean consolidation of leadership positions. Richard says this Trevor Campbell has a reputation for keeping key operational talent but restructuring upper management. I've never heard of him." Uncle Frank frowned. "Is he one of those tech guys moving into traditional retail?" "I don't know much about him," my mother replied. "Richard mentioned he's surprisingly young. Apparently built Axis Global from scratch in just 6 years." I watched as my mother pulled out her tablet and began searching for information. I need to prepare for tomorrow. I should learn everything I can about this company and its leadership. For the next few minutes, The family conversation split between concerned questions about Meridian's future and Bradley's confident assertions about how acquisitions typically unfold. I remained quiet, aware that the moment of revelation was approaching but content to let it arrive naturally. "This is strange," my mother suddenly said, frowning at her tablet. "There's almost no information about this Trevor Campbell online. No LinkedIn profile, no corporate biography, barely any photos." She continued scrolling through search results. "Just a few mentions in press releases and, wait." Her voice trailed off as she stared at the screen. The color drained from her face for the second time that evening. "Nancy?" my father prompted. "What is it?" My mother looked up slowly, her eyes fixing on me with a mixture of confusion and dawning realization. "There's an article from Business Insider about Axis Global's acquisition of Silverman's. It mentions that Trevor Campbell is a pseudonym. His real name is—" She paused, her voice barely audible. "Garrett Wilson." The room went completely silent. All eyes turned to me. For a moment, I simply continued eating my cheesecake, savoring both the dessert and the dramatic weight of the revelation. Then I set down my fork and met my mother's stunned gaze. "The board meeting is at 9 tomorrow, right?" I asked calmly. "I'm looking forward to presenting our vision for Meridian's future." "Is this some kind of joke?" Bradley broke the silence, his voice oscillating between disbelief and anger. "I assure you it's not," I replied. "Axis Global has submitted an offer to acquire Meridian Retail Corporation at a 40% premium over current market valuation. As CEO and majority shareholder of Axis Global, I'll be personally outlining our integration strategy to the board tomorrow morning." "You," my mother whispered. "You're Trevor Campbell? You own Axis Global?" "I am, and I do," I confirmed. "Though I prefer Garrett Wilson in family settings." Uncle Frank started laughing. "This is absurd. You run a small boutique store. You can't possibly be the CEO of a company capable of acquiring Meridian." "The boutique was never my primary business," I explained. "It was a retail laboratory where I developed and tested the concepts that eventually became Axis Global's operational model. Currently, we own 154 retail locations across 4 countries, with annual revenue exceeding $3 billion. The expressions around the room transformed from disbelief to shock as the truth sank in. "That's not possible," Bradley insisted. "We would have known. Something of that scale couldn't stay secret." "You never asked?" I shrugged. "You all assumed the boutique was the extent of my ambition because it fit your preconceived narrative about me. It was easier to accept your assumptions than to correct them." My mother was still staring at her tablet, scrolling through what appeared to be financial information about Axis Global. "This says your company is valued at over $4 billion, she said faintly. 4.8 as of last month's funding round," I corrected gently. "Though that will likely increase after the Meridian acquisition is announced publicly." "Why?" she asked, looking up at me with genuine confusion. "Why the secrecy? Why let us believe you were struggling with a small store all these years?" It was the question I'd been waiting for. "Why the secrecy?" I repeated my mother's question, looking around at the stunned faces of my family. "Initially, it was practical. I wanted to build something on my own merits, not through family connections or the Wilson name." "But we could have helped you," my father interjected, his expression caught between pride and hurt. "That's exactly what I wanted to avoid," I explained. "No offense, Dad. But if I'd announced I was launching a retail technology company, what would you have done?" He considered this. "I would have introduced you to my contacts. Perhaps helped secure some initial funding." "Exactly. And then Axis Global wouldn't have been my achievement. It would have been another Wilson family success story. Every milestone would have been attributed partly to those connections rather than to the strength of our business model and technology." My mother was still shaking her head in disbelief. "But to maintain this charade for 6 years? To let us believe you were—" She trailed off, perhaps realizing how revealing any ending to that sentence would be. To let you believe I was what, Mom? Unsuccessful? Underachieving? Wasting my potential? I kept my tone gentle but firm. Those were your judgments, not my reality. Bradley, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly stood up. This is ridiculous. I want to see proof. Anyone can make claims about secret business empires. Lauren, who had been watching the scene unfold with barely concealed satisfaction, pulled out her phone and projected her company ID badge onto the television screen via AirPlay. Her title clearly read, Director of Consumer Insights, Axis Global, complete with our corporate logo. I've been working for Garrett for 3 years, she announced to the room. Axis Global employs over 12,000 people across 4 countries. Our headquarters is in downtown Seattle, 15 blocks from Parallel, Garrett's boutique. You knew about this? Aunt Patricia turned to Lauren, astonished. Of course I knew. I'm part of the executive leadership team. Lauren replied with professional confidence I'd rarely heard her use in family settings. Garrett recruited me because of my consumer psychology background, not because we're cousins. This is insane. Bradley muttered, pacing now. So all those times we were patronizing you about your small shop, you were actually running a multi-billion-dollar company? That's accurate. I confirmed. Though to be fair, when I opened Parallel, Axis was just getting started. The boutique was always genuine. It's a profitable store that serves as our retail innovation lab. The only deception was letting you believe it was the entirety of my professional life. My mother had recovered some of her composure, the seasoned executive beginning to emerge from behind the shocked parent. The Meridian acquisition, is this some kind of revenge play? Because we underestimated you? Not at all. I replied honestly. Meridian is an attractive acquisition target for purely business reasons. Your real estate holdings alone justify the purchase price. And your established supply chain infrastructure complements our existing operations. The fact that you work there is coincidental, though I admit it does create an interesting situation. Interesting? She repeated incredulously. Garrett, you're about to acquire the company I've devoted 25 years to building. Interesting doesn't begin to cover it. What happens to Mom's position? Bradley asked, his professional instincts finally overriding his personal shock. That will depend on several factors, I answered carefully. Axis has a policy of evaluating existing leadership based on performance metrics and cultural fit rather than making sweeping personnel changes. We typically retain operational talent but restructure upper management to align with our corporate philosophy. The implications of my statement hung in the air. My mother was upper management. Are you saying you might fire your own mother? Uncle Frank asked, sounding almost impressed by the ruthlessness of the concept. I'm saying all Meridian executives will be evaluated by the same standards, I clarified. Though obviously, I would recuse myself from decisions regarding immediate family members to avoid conflicts of interest. My mother stood suddenly. I need to make some calls. The board, we need to discuss this development. The confidentiality clause in the acquisition offer prevents disclosure of the bidder's identity until after the board meeting tomorrow. I reminded her gently. Breaking that would jeopardize the 40% premium we're offering shareholders. She froze, caught between her corporate responsibilities and her personal shock. The seasoned executive won out. Of course, she said stiffly. Then I need to prepare for tomorrow's meeting. She turned and left the room. My father following after, shooting me a complicated look of confusion, pride, and concern. An awkward silence descended on the remaining family members. Well, Uncle Frank finally said, raising his whiskey glass. I guess I was wrong about your career trajectory, Garrett. Consider me corrected. There was new respect in his eyes. Though I recognized it came from the wrong place, he was impressed by the billions, not the vision or execution. Bradley remained standing, his expression unreadable. All this time, he said quietly. All those condescending comments about your little store. You must have been laughing at us. I wasn't laughing, Bradley. I was working. Building something I believed in while everyone around this table assumed I was failing because my definition of success didn't match yours. But why maintain the pretense after you'd achieved this level of success? Vanessa asked, her analytical mind clearly intrigued by the psychology behind my choices. Surely once Axis Global became significant, there was no need to hide it from your family. It was a perceptive question that cut to the heart of my more complex motivations. At first, it was about proving the business model without family advantages. I acknowledged. But as time passed and Axis grew, I realized something. None of you ever really asked about my work. You made assumptions, offered unsolicited advice, and occasionally expressed pity, but no one ever sat down and genuinely asked what I was building or why it mattered to me. The uncomfortable truth of this observation settled over the room. So yes. At some point it became an experiment of sorts. How long could successful people who pride themselves on business acumen fail to recognize actual success right in front of them because it didn't fit EIR preconceived narrative? Lauren slow clapped from her corner of the room. And that, family, is exactly why Garrett is a brilliant CEO. He understands how perception shapes reality better than anyone I've ever met. Bradley finally sat down, running his hands through his perfectly styled hair. So tomorrow, you're walking into Meridian as the acquirer, and Mom's company becomes a subsidiary of yours. That's correct. That's going to be one hell of a board meeting, he said. And for the first time that evening, I saw a glimmer of the brother I'd grown up with rather than the corporate persona he'd cultivated. Mom's going to need some time to process this. I know, I replied. And I'll give her that time. This isn't about humiliation or revenge. It's about business, and perhaps, eventually, about rebuilding family relationships based on who we actually are rather than who we're expected to be. I stood, placing my napkin beside my half-eaten cheesecake. I should go. We all have a lot to process, and I have a presentation to finalize for tomorrow. As I collected my coat, family members approached me one by one, some offering belated congratulations, others still processing their shock. Uncle Frank asked about investment opportunities with barely concealed opportunism. Bradley hung back, clearly struggling with the seismic shift in our long-established dynamic. At the door, I turned back to the family gathering that had been transformed in the span of 30 minutes. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone! I have a feeling next year's dinner will be quite different. As I drove away from my parents' house, I called Rachel, my COO. It's done, I told her. My family knows. How did they take it? She asked. About as expected. Shock, disbelief, recalibration. The usual stages of realizing someone isn't who you thought they were. And your mother? Is she ready for tomorrow? I considered this as I navigated the dark streets toward my downtown apartment. She's a professional. She'll compose herself and approach it as the executive she is. But no, she's not ready for what's coming. None of them are. Neither was I, if I was being honest with myself. After 6 years of compartmentalizing my life, the walls had finally come down. Tomorrow would begin a new chapter. One where Garrett Wilson and Trevor Campbell became a single identity, where family dynamics and business realities would inevitably collide. But for tonight, driving through the rain-slick streets of Seattle, I allowed myself to feel something I hadn't fully acknowledged before: relief. The weight of maintaining 2 separate lives had been heavier than I'd realized. Whatever came next would at least be authentic. The Meridian Retail Corporation headquarters occupied the top 10 floors of a sleek downtown Seattle tower. I'd visited the building countless times over the years for various industry events. But never as myself, never as both Garrett Wilson and Trevor Campbell simultaneously. As my driver pulled up to the main entrance, I straightened my tie and mentally reviewed my presentation. The acquisition wasn't personal, I reminded myself. This was business. a strategic move that made sense for both companies regardless of family connections. Rachel met me in the lobby, tablet in hand. "The board is assembled. Your mother arrived 20 minutes ago with the other executives. No one said anything to her about you being Trevor Campbell. They're waiting for the big reveal." "That seems unnecessarily dramatic." I frowned. "Welcome to corporate America." Rachel shrugged. "They've been underestimating you for years." "Can you blame them for enjoying the moment when she realizes her mistake?" "Actually, I can," I replied firmly. "Send a message to Richard. I want 5 minutes alone with my mother before the board meeting." Rachel raised an eyebrow but tapped out the message. Within moments, we received confirmation that Nancy Wilson was being asked to step into a private conference room adjacent to the boardroom. When I entered, my mother was standing by the window, her back straight. Her designer suit impeccable as always. She turned at the sound of the door, her expression carefully neutral despite the emotional turmoil she must have been experiencing. "Garrett," she acknowledged. "Or should I call you Mr. Campbell now?" "Mom," I replied gently. "I wanted to speak with you privately before the meeting. This situation is unusual enough without adding public spectacle." She nodded almost imperceptibly. "I appreciate that courtesy." An uncomfortable silence stretched between us, filled with unasked questions and unspoken apologies. "Why Meridian?" she finally asked. "Of all the retail companies you could acquire, why choose the one where your mother has devoted her career?" "The truth? Because it's the right business decision," I answered honestly. "Meridian has valuable assets but outdated operations. Your company needs exactly what Axis provides. And we need your distribution network and real estate holdings. The fact that you work here isn't why we're acquiring Meridian, but it's not something I could ignore in my decision-making either." "And my position?" she asked, her voice remarkably steady. "That's partly why I wanted to speak with you privately," I explained. "Your division consistently outperforms the others at Meridian. By our standard metrics, you would typically be retained in a similar operational role during the transition." "Typically," she repeated, hearing the qualifier. "The complication is obvious." I continued. "You're my mother. Any decision I make regarding your position will be scrutinized for favoritism or, conversely, for excessive harshness to prove impartiality." She nodded, the executive in her understanding the dilemma perfectly. "So I'm offering you options," I said. "You can remain as operational head of your division reporting to Rachel, our COO. You can transition to a special advisory role focusing on the integration of Meridian's operations with Axis systems. Or you can accept a generous retirement package that recognizes your contributions to Meridian and allows you to pursue other interests." My mother studied me with new eyes, not as her son but as the CEO making her a business proposition. "And if I choose to stay? Would I be expected to call you Mr. Campbell in meetings?" I allowed myself a small smile. "Professionally, I'm Garrett Wilson. Trevor Campbell has served his purpose. And no, you'd call me Garrett in meetings. Just as you'd expect professional treatment in return." She considered this, then asked the question that had likely been foremost in her mind since last night. "Were you ever going to tell us? If this acquisition hadn't happened, would we ever have known about your success?" It was the fair question I'd been asking myself throughout the sleepless night. Honestly, I don't know. What began as a practical decision to build something independently evolved into something more complex. The longer the separation continued, the more difficult it became to bridge it. And more satisfying to maintain it. She observed shrewdly. To know something they didn't. I acknowledged this with a slight nod. There was some satisfaction in that, I admitted. Not my proudest motivation. For the first time, my mother's professional facade softened slightly. "I imagine we bear some responsibility for that. We haven't always been your most supportive audience." "It's not about assigning blame," I replied. "We all made choices based on our values and perceptions. Mine led me here. just as yours led you to your achievements at Meridian. She checked her watch, the consummate professional even in personal crisis. The board is waiting. Which of those options would you recommend? As CEO? As CEO, I'd recommend the integration advisor role. We genuinely need your institutional knowledge, and it creates appropriate distance in the reporting structure. But as your son? I paused. I'd suggest considering what you actually want at this stage of your life, possibly for the first time. Something flickered across her face, recognition, perhaps, of a truth she hadn't acknowledged to herself. We should go in, she said, moving toward the door. Then she paused. For what it's worth, Garrett, I'm impressed. Not just by the success, but by how you achieved it. On your own terms. It wasn't quite an apology, nor was it a complete reconciliation, but it was a beginning. I nodded in acknowledgement as we walked together toward the boardroom. The board meeting itself was anticlimactic after the emotional complexity of the previous 24 hours. I presented Axis Global's vision for Meridian, modernizing operations while preserving brand equity, implementing our proprietary technology stack, and strategically integrating our respective strengths. Questions were asked and answered professionally, with my mother contributing valuable insights from her operational expertise. If board members were expecting drama or family tension, they were disappointed. Nancy Wilson and Garrett Wilson conducted themselves as consummate professionals, their personal relationship invisible beneath their business personas. By meeting's end, the board unanimously recommended shareholders accept our offer. As we gathered our materials, Richard Sullivan, the executive VP who had called my mother during Thanksgiving dinner, approached me with an extended hand. I've followed Trevor Campbell's career with great interest, he said, shaking my hand firmly. Never imagined he was Nancy's son. You've built something remarkable, Mr. Wilson. Thank you, I replied, though it was never a solo effort. Axis Global succeeds because of our team and our collective vision. As the boardroom emptied, my mother lingered, reviewing documents with deliberate focus. When we were finally alone, she looked up. I'll take the integration advisor role, she said decisively. 3 years, after which we can reassess. Good choice, I nodded. Rachel will be thrilled. She's been hoping to learn from your operational expertise. My mother gathered her papers precisely. Will you be at your father's birthday dinner next month? I will, I confirmed. As myself, just Garrett. Good, she said simply, and with a professional nod she left the boardroom. In the months that followed, the integration of Meridian into Axis Global proceeded remarkably smoothly, due in no small part to my mother's insights. Her institutional knowledge proved invaluable, and her willingness to embrace our technology-driven approach surprised everyone, including, perhaps, herself. Our family dynamics shifted too, though more gradually. My father, ever the pragmatist, adjusted quickly to his son's success, even offering occasional legal insights that proved valuable. Uncle Frank made several transparent attempts to invest in Axis Global before finally accepting that our funding rounds were closed to family members, a policy I'd implemented specifically to maintain the separation between business and family. Bradley struggled the most with our reconfigured relationship. After years as the family's golden child, he found himself sharing the spotlight. His Goldman Sachs partnership slightly dimmed by comparison to his younger brother's billions. Our interactions were awkward at first, then cautiously professional, and finally, gradually, began to recover something of the genuine brotherhood we'd shared as children before family expectations had driven us into our respective corners. 6 months after the acquisition, I invited my parents to visit Axis Global headquarters for the first time. My mother had been working remotely as an advisor, deliberately maintaining professional distance during the transition. So this is where Trevor Campbell became a retail revolutionary, my father remarked as I showed them the open concept offices where our technology, analytics, and operations teams collaborated. This is where a team of dedicated people builds something innovative, I corrected gently. Trevor Campbell was just a name on press releases. As we toured the facilities, I noticed my mother studying everything with professional interest: the workflow designs, the technology integration, the cultural elements that made Axis different from traditional retail corporations. She was seeing not just her son's company but the manifestation of a business philosophy distinctly different from her own. "You've created something remarkable here," she acknowledged as we concluded the tour in my modest office, deliberately designed to be indistinguishable from those of other executives. "It's not how I would have built it, but I can see why it works." Coming from Nancy Wilson, this was high praise indeed. "Different approaches can both be valid," I replied. "Your career at Meridian was impressive by any standard. But ultimately, Meridian needed what Axis offered," she noted with clear-eyed pragmatism. "The traditional model I championed couldn't adapt quickly enough." We ended the day at Parallel, my original boutique store that had started everything. The space remained largely unchanged, still 800 square feet of carefully curated products. Still a retail laboratory where we tested concepts before implementing them across our now extensive network. "You know, I never really looked at this place properly before," my mother admitted, running her hand along a display of locally crafted homewares. "I saw what I expected to see, a small operation that didn't match my definition of success." "We often find evidence to support our existing beliefs," I observed. "I did the same thing, assuming you'd never understand my vision because it didn't match your career path." She nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps we're more alike than either of us recognized." That evening, as I locked up the boutique that had been both my cover story and my inspiration, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The secret empire I'd built had never really been about proving my family wrong. It had been about proving something to myself. That success could be defined personally rather than by external validation. That meaningful achievement came from pursuing vision rather than status. The most valuable revelation wasn't showing my family what I'd built behind their backs. It was recognizing that true success wasn't measured by the size of my company or the billions in my accounts, but by the integrity of building something worthwhile on my own terms. My phone buzzed with a message from Lauren. "Family dinner at your place next Sunday? Mom's making everyone come since it's neutral territory now." I smiled and replied affirmatively. The journey wasn't over. Family relationships were always works in progress, but at least now we were building on a foundation of authenticity rather than assumption. As I walked to my car, still the same Honda Civic, now kept by choice rather than necessity, I passed a young entrepreneur locking up her newly opened bakery across the street. She waved with the exhausted pride particular to small business owners at the end of a long day. I waved back, recognizing in her the same determination that had driven me 6 years ago. Success wasn't a destination or a dollar figure. It was the freedom to define your own path and the courage to walk it regardless of who understood. What about you? Have you ever been underestimated by those closest to you? Or have you discovered that success means something different than what you were taught? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of hidden success and family revelations, hit that like button and subscribe for more unexpected journeys through the complex terrain of ambition, family, and finding your own definition of achievement. Thanks for listening, and remember, sometimes the smallest shops conceal the biggest visions.